It's an honor now to be joined by Athletic Director Tim Collins here at Eastern Washington University, talking a little bit about NIL. It's maybe a dirty topic in college athletics. Everyone's super scared about it. But I want to ask you, because you have a unique perspective dealing with coaches, dealing with athletes, and of course dealing with the community. Let's start positive. What are the good things about NIL that people have to keep in mind when there's obviously some frustrations about it, but what are the positives?
Well, I think one of the things that people need to remember is the context for why name, image, and likeness started. Okay, it wasn't fair that our industry was really regulating or limiting student athletes' earning potential when they weren't really being treated equitably across campus. I always use the example, if you had a student on a music scholarship and they signed a record deal, they wouldn't lose the music scholarship. But if a student athlete signed a record deal, they would become ineligible. And so I think what was hard was we were in an era where we needed to deregulate, and we probably did so a couple of decades too late, and now it's hard getting the toothpaste back in the tube. But from a positive, we have student athletes who have legitimate entrepreneurial spirits, and some of the things that they're able to accomplish now that they wouldn't have been able to before, like camps, youth clinics back in their own hometowns, where they're able to monetize their ability to earn. They were never able to do that before, so that's definitely a positive.
When you talk about your role as an athletic director, how much is the job now focused on NIL versus 15 years ago when it wasn't a thing you would deal with?
Yeah, well, I think it's the new arms race, right? The people are kind of talking about it as the frontier. So 15 years ago, it was facilities and cost of attendance, Alston scholarships, nutrition, all these other things that were kind of the latest advancements in providing opportunities for our student athletes. Well, now it's name, image, and likeness. And so I'd say it takes up a fair amount of my day, and probably more so with some sports than others. It's purely been market driven, which I think is interesting for our level in the football championship subdivision, is we will now find a time of where we all settle in the market, right? 20 years ago, we didn't have better facilities than Alabama. Well, this year we don't have better NIL than Alabama, right? So what is all relative, and where can we find ourselves? Because we have championship aspirations at our level as well in the Big Sky Conference, and specifically FCS and football.
When you talk about some of those challenges, trying to get that toothpaste back in the tube, I feel like everybody sees it, and it just seems like it's, you don't want to use the term pay for play, but it kind of. But it feels that way. Yeah. So how do you address those concerns? I mean, if you have somebody that's you want to get on board with NIL, but they're just waving the red flag about some of the things they see.
Yeah, I think probably the thing we have to remember is that everybody likes an open market until it negatively impacts them, right? And I would say for our student athletes, we're still about creating opportunities. Here at Eastern Washington, the opportunity for a student athlete to achieve academically and athletically, that's still the primary opportunity for us. And so, whatever happens in a free market or whatever happens in an open market, we'll try to react to as best that we can. But the reality is, for a lot of athletes, and this is probably speaking more across the NCAA Division I landscape, their peak earning potential is when they're a college student athlete, right? You think of, they talked about the gymnast at LSU, her social media following, all of that. Well, there's no professional association for her to go into in the next 10 years, and so her peak marketability was when she was in college. So you might as well allow them to capture that when they have that opportunity.
Yeah, I love that you make the allegory to 20 years ago we didn't have better facilities in Alabama, and today we don't have better NIL, because it seems like a lot of people, you can hear about it and you just want to throw your hands up, but you can't afford to do that.
No.
So how do you stay in the fight, really, when you're dealing with maybe different schools at the FCS that might have larger budgets, and then of course the FBS, where maybe they're looking at FCS level as almost kind of like a developmental league, and trying to pick players away in any sport.
I had somebody tell me last week they love progress, but they hate change, right? And so I think we just, as an industry, we have to do a better job of leaning in to what all the opportunities are that exist. we're not going to change it, and nor should we try to change it. And so I kind of keep saying that we're navigating. I think the one thing that is probably the most troublesome is really, I'll say, the combustible moment that is NIL and the transfer portal, right? And those two, where they intersect, I think makes people feel a little bit uncomfortable. But once again, I think you have to lean into it, because places like ours, we've also benefited from the transfer portal, right? And so I know sometimes it feels like it hurts us more than it helps us. Well, I look back to last year, and Big Sky Player of the Year in women's basketball, and she led us to the NCAA tournament. Well, we got her out of the transfer portal, and we had some connections to her. And Jamie Loetta is going to go down in history as one of the best eags ever in the sport of women's basketball. So we benefited from it too, and so now we just have to kind of work those things together.
I think it's refreshing to hear somebody who's in an administrative role have a positive spin on it, because it feels like, from the fan role, like you said, everybody likes the free market till it affects them. Everybody likes progress, but they don't like change. So for maybe some Eastern fans who might be a little bit frustrated, who feels like, okay, it always feels like, you know, we're starting over with a roster every year, you know, a brand new roster in men's and women's basketball, you know, turnover in the football roster as well, and the other sports too. Just what would you say to them, fans of any school, whether it's Eastern Washington or any of the schools around here or across the country, since you seems to have a forward-thinking approach to it? What would you say on how to try and stay optimistic on things?
Yeah, well, and that's one thing that we in our industry have to make sure, that the academic completion, or that academic element, stays paramount. I mean that, you know, and that's one thing that's probably made me a little bit nervous as a professional in higher education, is some of the, you know, when we see somebody who's been at 4 schools in 4 years, sometimes I kind of sit back and go, okay, what was the academic outcome to that experience? It doesn't mean somebody can't transfer schools and come away with a great degree. So what I would tell our fans at Eastern is that we are still focused on the student-athlete experience, on the development opportunities academically, athletically, and as we put it in our department, holistically, whether that be how we've expanded nutrition opportunities, professional development and career development, leadership development in our department. We've done that in the last 18 months. I would say those things are still central to the experience of a student-athlete. Does roster composition, roster changes, does that makeup look different now? Yeah, probably. But on Saturdays, as an example, our responsibility as an athletics department is to bring everybody together, bring everybody out to Roos Field, and celebrate being Eags. You know, we got a lot of alumni. Maybe they only went for 1 or 2 years, but they love the Eags on Saturdays, and that's great. That's what we want. And so some of that may look a little different, but we can still come together and celebrate being an Eag.
Feels like with conference realignment, the transfer portal and the NIL implications on it, and also the House settlement, it feels like we are rapidly approaching a boiling point. Can you project what that boiling point is? Because it seems like anything's on the table now.
Yeah.
I mean, we have schools going across the country for conference games, so it feels like, can you give a 3, 5, 10-year outlook on the world of college athletics right now? If
I could, I wouldn't be, you know, I don't. Well, I'd be at the casino or something if I could predict things like that. If you go back to 2 years ago to our first interview, I probably looked a lot younger. But those things that you just mentioned, those are the things that keep us up at night. Those are the things that keep coaches up at night, too, quite honestly. You know, where do we see this going in the next 3 to 5 years? I think the pending House settlement is a big piece of that. One of the ideas behind it was that that would at least provide a little bit of stability for the next 10 years. Okay, everybody had to feel a little bit of pain into it. Was kind of the idea. Now, we'll see what happens. Your guess is as good as mine. So we'll see what happens with that. When it comes to conference realignment, you know, as soon as we think that something's going to settle, that's when Texas and Oklahoma go to the SEC, and then UCLA and USC go to the Big Ten. Which, talk about sustainable. I don't know how sustainable some of that travel is for all of our sports, just being completely honest. So I don't know where all the conference realignment thing, where those things settle. As is well documented, I came from the FBS level. And I think one thing that I've really appreciated about the FCS level is we know who we are and we know who we're not trying to be. And that, I think, is really important because we have an identity in football championship subdivision football. Okay, and that actually goes through with all of our sports as well. Men's and women's basketball, volleyball, all of our sports are competing for the at-large berth in the NCAA tournament. We have track athletes, cross-country athletes that are trying to be individual qualifiers in their championship segments. All those things matter for us as a department, and so we kind of have that North Star that we can point to, and that's our identity, and we're good with that. So I think that's our biggest hope. If I could speak for my colleagues and respective athletic director leadership at other FCS schools or other mid-major or low D1s, is that we maintain our access to the NCAA championships. That really matters for us.
Absolutely. You hear it from fans, you hear it from coaches, former coaches, you hear it from media members. You know, the phrase, we need guidelines or we need guardrails around the world of the NIL, transfer portal, all of that. If there were some guardrails in place, do you think some of the challenges that you've talked about would be alleviated a bit? And what would maybe some of those guardrails look like?
Yeah, I think you look at it, and this is also where leadership, whether that be coaches and administrators, we have to adapt a little bit. I was talking to one of our head coaches earlier today, and I said, man, your roster plan for next year is going to look a lot different because he had two student athletes, one decided to retire and one decided to go into the portal, that aren't going to be on his roster, and he was kind of counting on them as upperclassmen leadership next year. That team's going to look different, so we have to adapt to it. What guardrails could be in place, as far as the portal goes? I'm telling you, it's going to be really hard to regulate student athletes to restrictions that other students or the adults in the room aren't subject to, right? I was really disappointed, growing up, Irish Catholic, a little bit of a Notre Dame fan, right? And I remember years ago when Notre Dame's head football coach, Brian Kelly, was up for a college football playoff spot, right? Something had to happen in conference championship weekend, and he took the LSU job. More power to him. He was able to. There were contractual obligations that needed to be met because of his contract and going to LSU. And I thought when that happened, I go, holy cow, how are we going to tell a student athlete they can't leave? And those are some things that I think people are trying to figure out is what's the best timing for the portal windows. But the reality is the adults in the room can go in the portal room or into the portal at any time. So how are you going to tell the student athletes they can't? So when you talk about guardrails, I think I go back to ensuring that the academic outcome is still happening. About a decade ago, the NCAA instituted progress towards degree requirements, other items like that were ensuring that student athletes were achieving meaningful degrees. If we can get back to that, I think the portal stuff, some of the NIL stuff, some of that will start to settle. Because I do wonder, in terms of understanding what credits are transferable from school to school. I think some of those things will kind of help everything settle down.
So it seems like each school has their own approach to NIL specifically, whether it's through collectives or fundraising campaigns. And I know that that's a big part of your job, and that's something that you kind of oversee. So could you tell us a little bit about what Eastern specifically is doing in the realm of fundraising and whatnot?
Yeah, and as the landscape evolves, our kind of rules of what we can do and how we can support our student athletes through their name, image, and likeness initiatives, that kind of takes more clarity. And so one of the things we've been able to do over the last couple of months is launch goeags.com/NIL. And that's really our hub of all of our NIL activities for our student athletes. We have the Rise of the Red Collective, which is kind of that Oh, a traditional NIL space that a lot of people are hearing about. They're the third-party collectives where fans can make donations or make contributions to NIL funds that then the collective helps, facilitate what those appearances are for the student athletes. Okay, that's the rise of the Red. We also have a marketplace through Open Doors where fans can find, their favorite student athlete and get them to do a business appearance or a birthday party appearance or something like that. And then the last one that I've had a lot of fun with is we have a site through Influxer where fans can buy merchandise, right? They can buy T-shirts or jerseys of their favorite player, right? I know James, my son, last year, he wanted his Efton Chisholm T-shirt. You know what I mean? Like all those kinds of things. Right? Yeah. And so those are the opportunities where fans can really have an impact. We've had some fun experiences and some engagement with, even some of our student athlete alumni that own a business, Priority Tax Relief here in town. They did an NIL deal with a handful of our football student athletes, really sharing the story of what their company does. But one of the interesting things, it wasn't just marketing for their business and trying to acquire new customers. They really target Eastern student athletes to come work for them. Okay, they like having former student athletes come work for them because those are people that have been coached. They work on a team. They know how to stick to a timeline. All those kinds of things. So that was kind of a fun NIL deal that will lead into future career opportunities for our student athletes.
And I think that's what people want to see more of from NIL. They want to see, like you were talking about, go to this website and book Eastern football players, Eastern basketball players, Eastern volleyball players to come out to your business and whatever it may be. That's what NIL, I think, is kind of at the core of it, not here's $2 million, jump in the transfer portal.
Right.
So how much do you take pride in the kind of the more organic, I guess I would say, those opportunities for your student athletes and for the community?
Yeah, well, I'm super proud of one of our receivers, Nolan Ulm, who is in his hometown of Kelowna, like I mentioned earlier, doing these football camps. And to see his entrepreneurial spirit shine and kind of his planning really mature over the last year is really cool. That's an educational experience. Like we talk about being the region's polytechnic, at Eastern Washington University. Well, that is the definition of experiential learning. And trust me, when it comes to the birthday party appearances and all that, our student athletes are the star of the show, not the athletic director, right? It's all about them.
Last question for you, and I've asked you this before, but everything changes so much, it's worth asking again. If you could go back and talk to the younger Tim Collins who is getting into this world, starting to get into administration, and tell him, hey, this is what your job's going to look like, do you think he still signs up for it?
Absolutely, because the best part of my job still exists. I get to work with 300 young people, and the opportunities that we're creating for them, to be socially mobile, right? And to create opportunities for them that better their situation, better their family situation. Those things happen. Now with the portal, maybe I get to meet a few more along the way. Okay, that's fine. We had a student athlete here in one of our winter sports. He went into the portal. And he and I would say, if I don't have near the relationship that our coaches have with our student athletes, so I need to call that out because our coaches are on the front line of supporting our student athletes on a day-to-day basis. But some of them I have a different connection with. And this young man is going into the portal, and kind of walked by my office on his way to where he had to submit the paperwork, and kind of had his head down, not kind of worried what's Tim going to say. And I greeted him just like normal, and hey, how are we doing? No, I know you're going on the portal. You're graduating from Eastern Washington next month, right? Yep. Hey, we each held up our end of the bargain. And that I think sometimes the fans don't see. They see that somebody went into the portal, but they don't see that one of the reasons why they're able to be eligible immediately afterwards is because they earned their degree from Eastern Washington. And ultimately, that's what we need to be in the business of, okay? And Austin, you've heard me a lot. We talk about our 3 buckets of service. We talk about serving our student athletes, serving our campus, serving our community. If we stay focused on those areas, and NIL fills in some of those buckets, right? That's a part of our philosophy as a department. We'll be just fine.
Always good to talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yep. Athletic Director Tim Collins.